Welcome to the St. Louis Kaplan Feldman Holocaust Museum. My name is Myron Friedman. I'm the museum's executive director, and we're honored to be hosting tonight's program, to have all of you with us here today. Thank you very much. The museum stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and a reminder of the dangers of hatred and indifference. Tonight's program is especially important as we confront the troubling rise of anti-Semitism in our world. At its core, our mission is to use the history and lessons of the Holocaust to reject hatred, promote understanding, and inspire change. This is not just a place of education, but a space for action, a space where we can gather as a community, learn from the past, and explore how we respond to the challenges we face today. So we're very grateful to have you here for this meaningful conversation. Undoubtedly, you share our commitment to building a world where anti-Semitism and hate have no place. We encourage you to return to the museum for a visit to the Holocaust exhibit, to an upcoming event, even to see our new exhibit downstairs, The Artist Who Captured Eichmann. It's now my pleasure to introduce Bob Newmark, board chair of the Jewish Federation of St. Louis. Bob has been instrumental in advancing efforts to combat anti-Semitism and ensuring that our community remains united and strong during these difficult times. Please join me in welcoming Bob Newmark.
Good evening, and thank you, Myron. And thank you all for being here tonight for what I know is going to be a really interesting and important conversation. I'd like to begin by thanking our community sponsors this evening: AJC, JCRC, WashU Hillel, WashU BBYO, JSU, and the Kaplan Feldman Holocaust Museum for hosting us in this wonderful space. Let me share with you a little bit about how this program came about. On October 8th, or perhaps the 9th, 2023, Chancellor Martin called me to talk about the horrendous attacks committed by Hamas. So we had established open lines of communication going back several years, actually, and it was very easy for us to have this conversation, as difficult as it was. And I really credit Andrew for recognizing how important it was to communicate his sincere care and concern for our community in real time. In that conversation, before anything really crazy had happened here or on other campuses, Andrew pointed out what I think became the most critical guiding principle that he intended to follow, one that many universities failed to recognize then or even now. And that was that the university had well-established rules of conduct already in place, and they were going to enforce their rules. There was no need to invent a new playbook for these circumstances. So both Chancellor Martin and Dr. G attended the AJC Hillel University President's Summit on Anti-Semitism in the summer of 2023. And Chancellor Martin was one of the co-hosts of that program this past summer. I am certain that Andrew's legal background, his exposure to these issues at that summit, and his grounding in basic administration philosophy helped ensure that WashU remained a safe place for Jewish students. As our conversations have continued over the past 13 and a half months, Chancellor Martin asked whether it might be informative for our community to hear directly from him. And that openness led to this evening. I also want to thank Rebecca Brown, who is Vice Chancellor for Strategic Initiatives and University Governance, who works closely with Chancellor Martin and who is a member of our Jewish community as well. Rebecca has been steadfast in ensuring open lines of communication between the university and our community, and also ensuring that the campus environment remains safe and welcoming for all. So I'm going to give a very brief background on each of our panelists. I know you are more interested in hearing from them than from me. Chancellor Martin was appointed as WashU's 15th chancellor by the university's Board of Trustees in July of 2018. He's also a professor of political science, law, statistics, and data science. And throughout his career in higher education administration, Andrew has taught courses in judicial decision-making and political methodology and mentored numerous graduate and doctoral students. Chancellor Martin earned his PhD in political science from WashU in 1998 and his AB from College of William and Mary in mathematics and government in 1994. He and his wife Stephanie are the parents of a daughter, Olive. Dr. Ana Gonzalez, or Dr. G, as she is known to students, is a nationally recognized student affairs leader with over 30 years of experience in higher education. As the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs at WashU, Dr. Gonzalez's primary focus is to provide leadership to the university's renowned Division of Student Affairs, engage with students to recognize their needs and enhance their experiences. A first-generation college student who immigrated to the United States at the age of 10, Gonzalez is a graduate of Loyola Marymount University with a bachelor's degree in international business, and she earned her master's and doctoral degrees, both in education, from Claremont Graduate University. Dr. G enjoys traveling, getting to know the local food scene, gardening, and spending lots of time with her family and her dog, Yoshi. And Jackie Levy, originally from Buffalo, New York, moved to St. Louis to attend Washington University. During college, she interned at Hillel. She co-founded a group called Black Women, Jewish Women, and was president of the student union, WashU Student Government. Jackie loves St. Louis and WashU, and after a fellowship in political campaign work in Washington, D.C., she returned to WashU for law school. And after 8 years of practicing law in St. Louis, it was time to return to the campus that she loves to help foster one of the most vibrant campus Jewish communities in the country, and helping to cultivate the next generation of Jewish leaders on one of the most important times in our history. Jackie is married to Jim, and they have a son, Asher, and a daughter, Maddie. And last but not least, our moderator this evening, Maggie Fredman. Maggie is AJC's Director of Communal Partnerships, and in this role, she serves as AJC's lead representative to national Jewish organizations and is AJC's key voice in collaborative spaces. Prior to this role, she served as Senior Director of AJC's Alexander Young Leadership Department, where she helped empower and engage young Jews around the globe through the oversight of AJC's 3 realms of young leadership, AJC's High School Affairs Department, AJC's Campus Affairs Department, and AJC's Young Professional Initiative, Access. And before that, Maggie worked in AJC's Leadership Development Engagement Department, where I first had the privilege of working and getting to know her. Maggie received her BA from Boston University and holds a master's in public administration with a concentration in nonprofit management from George Washington University's Trachtenberg School of Public Policy and Public Administration. A native Bostonian, she now resides in St. Louis, where she lives with her husband and 3 daughters. So with that, I'm excited to turn this evening's program over to you, Maggie.
Thank you so much, Bob. So I want to kick us off to set the tone for this important conversation. First of all, thank you all for joining us this evening, and we have a number of folks who are watching us virtually as well. So I don't think I need to necessarily say this to this room, but I want to kick us off that there are so many reasons that we should be so proud to have WashU in our community, in our city, in our state. WashU brings so much culture, art, innovation, medical advancements, the lists go on and on. But especially as I'm looking around this room, there are so many people here. I see students, I see alum, I see a number of folks who work for WashU, who support WashU. The intersections with our community are tremendous. But I think importantly, and this is where our conversation will lead, as American Jews, the pride we have associated with WashU has taken on renewed importance since 10/7, and that is really in complete part because of the folks who I have here on stage with me. And we are going to delve in for the next 45 minutes or so into moderated conversation, and then we're going to open up to questions, both those that some of you submitted and then audience Q&A. So keep those in mind as our conversation kicks off. So let's start from the beginning, and this is really for all of you. I want to take us back to those first days following October 7th, the deadliest attack on Jews since the Holocaust. And can each of you, from your very different vantage points at WashU. Share what you experienced right after 10/7 and what steps you took in those days that followed. And actually, I think the way we're sitting works out nicely. So maybe actually, Jackie, let's start with you to hear about the student experience and then keep going.
Thank you, and thank you so much for allowing me to be here on this panel with these wonderful humans and leaders in our community. So going back, seeing that you were going to ask this question, really going back this past year to those early moments was really hard. I think as we all, as a Jewish community, when we think back to those initial moments of uncertainty and confusion and grief and mourning, WashU happened to be on fall break at that time, and so our students, for the most part, were either traveling, home with their families and loved ones, or with friends. But we happened to have about 40 to 50 students who stayed with Hillel over that weekend. It was Simchas Torah, and we didn't know at that point, but WashU was quickly becoming one of the most notable places to celebrate Simchas Torah in the country. This past year, we had about 30, 40 guests who students brought to celebrate with them. And so that was probably one of the hardest moments in my 15 plus tenure as the Hillel director. The students were davening in our multipurpose room, and I had to interrupt them. They thought I was going in to deliver a Dvar Drash, and in tears conveyed to the students, many of whom had family in Israel, had loved ones who were in the IDF at the time, siblings and others, to convey what had been happening in real time. Otherwise, they wouldn't have known. And then we went into triage and crisis mode as we do in working with our partners at the university and at the Federation, notifying them what resources we had in play and what we were going to need in terms of support to be able to go into triage mode for our community by providing counseling and support services free of charge for our students, moving into having, our WashU dogs, Bear and Brookie, our therapy dogs, be with us for that week, at times bringing the students together for lunch and study breaks, and just making sure that WashU had multiple safe spaces, particularly at Hillel and Chabad, for students to gather and decompress and to mourn and grieve together. That Sunday evening, even though it was fall break, we also went into planning mode, working with our partners at the university and Scapiando in terms of increased security and patrols and what would come to be to have regular security guards at our events. And we also planned a vigil that happened, I think, the Thursday after the students returned. We had about 750 students come together in the Edison Courtyard outside our Danforth University Center to be together in prayer and in song and just to lean on one another. And it was an incredible moment of unity for our campus community and for our partners at the university to be there and to be supportive. And I'll never forget those first few moments and days.
Well, thanks, Jackie, and thank you all for the invitation to be here tonight and give us an opportunity to share some of the experiences we've had on our campus over the last 13 or 14 months. I think back to that weekend. My initial reaction was absolute shock, and at least immediately I was paralyzed. I mean, I was like, began to think about what does this mean? What does this mean for our university? What does it mean for our students, for our employees, for our faculty? What does this mean for our community? As Jackie mentioned, we were on fall break. Many members of my leadership team were not in St. Louis, and so we weren't able to be together with one another. But very quickly began, in the first place we started, who do we have in Israel today? And thankfully, we could answer that question. It just happened that we had one student who was studying abroad in Europe, happened to be in Israel for the weekend. We had no faculty and staff who were in Israel at the time, and of course, immediately began to work with that student. And then we began to pivot about what's next, and it became really clear, and I want to give a big shout out to Rebecca Brown, our Vice Chancellor, for providing good sage wisdom, as she always does, that it was important for us to be in communication with our community partners, both Hillel and Chabad at the university, and also with the Federation, just to make sure that we were in communication so everyone knew what we were doing and what we were thinking and what resources we could provide and what advice and counsel we needed as we began to think things through. At one level, having our students not with us was an advantage. It gave us 3.5 days to figure out how we would welcome our students back into a dramatically changed world. On the other hand, not having our students here was really difficult because there was a lot of communication, there was a lot of things going on, a lot of rumors that were flying around, and what we were doing in a, for some, a very plodding way, I would say for us in a very careful way, we're trying to figure out what was the right way to get back to the business of the university in this dramatically changed world in a way that was going to be sensitive to our students and to a big chunk of our broader community.
Dr. G, anything to add there?
Yeah, so actually, and I don't know if I shared this with Chancellor Martin, but the first call I got, because it was fall break, and in my job, I was like, I'm going to sleep in this weekend and just relax. The students are gone, so I can just do that. So I turned off all the alarms. And then I get a call and I look, like, who's calling? And it's the Chancellor, and I always answer my colleagues. And then he told me, and it quickly turned, shock, sadness, worry, and unbelievable. I mean, really, I heard him say, I turned on, and I still had to see it. So all those things. And then one of my first emails or calls or texts I remember was to Jackie. And even though I knew he couldn't answer at the time, sent one to Hershey as well at Chabad. So our partners started doing that work. And what we did was to really wrap our hands around the students, our arms around the students who we knew. And so we sent messages, personal message to students who we knew had at least addresses or connections to Israel. And at least those we knew we could get that from the database. And then started planning and thinking, how can we support our students, whether they're at different places or near us? And it was scary because we didn't know, and honestly, there's not a playbook for this. And all I wanted to do as their vice chancellor, I tell people I have 15,000 kids, is to bring them all home and gather them together and be with them, all of them, and in particular our Jewish students. And so it was scary, but I think that at the back of our minds, it was how can we be the one to support those who are most in need and in crisis.
I just want to say collectively, thank you for the thoughtfulness that went into that. I think I speak for not just those in the room, but certainly for WashU's Jewish community. I want to turn to another moment I think that was complex nationwide and certainly on campus. And Chancellor Martin, this is for you. There is, of course, a long and storied history of college protests in this country. But the encampments and the protests that we saw in this spring introduced something that was quite different, and I think for many of us quite disturbing, which was an increase in Jewish students being attacked and harassed on many campuses, and in certain instances, really entire campus ecosystems breaking down. And Chancellor Martin, for the room, I want to quote actually from your April statement about the encampment efforts at WashU. You said, in quote, "We've all watched as protests have spiraled out of control on other campuses across the country in recent months. We are not letting this happen here. To those who plan to continue to come to campus with the intention of disrupting our education and research mission and violating our policies, please know we will respond proportionally each and every time. You will not do this here," end quote. First of all, I think that alone probably gets a real round of applause for most folks. But my question for you is walk us through that decision to make that statement, to act swiftly, when so many of your fellow colleagues, your fellow presidents across the country chose a very different route.
So I've got to tell you that statement is the toned down version of the initial statement that we drafted. It was really salty in the first draft, and we did calm it down a little bit before we sent it out. So we were watching what had been happening around the country, and just, I guess, take a step back before that. You know, we've had protests on our university campus all the time. I mean, I've been the chancellor now for just about 6 years. We have 30 or 40 protests every year. That's great. I teach a course, free speech on campus. You want to go march around and yell and scream and whatever, that's great. I mean, that's part of being a college student, at least for some. Now, you know, there's also clear lines. I mean, lines that one cannot pass, you know, true threats, harassment, and the like. And of course, you can't be taking over physical spaces, taking over buildings and whatnot. We actually had an encampment my first year as chancellor. We had about 10 graduate students in a tent protesting minimum wage. And after we resolved that situation, we decided we wanted a no encampment policy for the very simple reason that when you're sleeping on our campus in the middle of the night, who's responsible? We are. So we're providing 24/7 security and indemnification, and I'm like, well, this is just crazy. I think there's other reasons why one wouldn't want to have encampments on their campuses either, particularly, you know, because we have communal spaces, and when you start taking communal spaces and grabbing them for one group or the other, you're implicitly taking away the use of the space by other groups. So as we rolled through the fall, I mean, we had a number of protests in the fall, and they were fine and straightforward. I mean, some of the rhetoric used in those protests crossed the line. And I called it out when I saw it, not so much as you cannot say X, but it's below the dignity of our community to use this type of rhetoric. And thankfully, many of our students listened to that. I was kind of shocked that they'd listened to the chancellor and the board chair about that, but at least we gave it a shot. But once we moved late in the fall semester and pivoted into the spring, we were seeing what was happening on other campuses. And our leadership team got together and said, look, what is the line? And the line for us is really straightforward. You can protest on our campus, that's fine. You can't take over buildings, you can't destroy property, and you can't set up encampments. We had policies to that effect already in place. And we made it clear to the community that we were going to enforce those policies. I think what happened on some other campuses is they didn't have those types of policies, or they did have those policies, but they weren't willing to enforce them. Now, I can tell you that the decision to have 100 individuals arrested on our campus at the end of April was not an easy decision. The last thing I ever want to do is to deploy our police force against anyone, but particularly our students. Now, we had a particularly unique challenge. We're not the only university who faced this situation, but many universities didn't. And many universities were just student protests. On our campus, 3/4 of the individuals who were on the campus were unaffiliated with the university. All right, so we were in a situation where we had some students and a few faculty and staff, along with community activists from St. Louis and some from around the country, who were using our campus as their stage to drive attention. We made the decision that was not going to happen on our campus. And the reason was really straightforward. At least I thought it was straightforward. So what happens if you let someone set up an encampment on your campus? One of two things is going to happen, right? One, you're going to sit down and negotiate with them. We saw that on other campuses. And I can certainly tell you that I'm not going to sit down and negotiate with anybody about anything, particularly if they're going to try to bring us to the table by force. But there are certain things like our investment policy and our endowment that's just frankly a settled matter and non-negotiable. Or two, you let folks set up a tent, you have to provide security, and the amount of force that's going to be needed to remove that encampment at some point down the road is going to be even more substantial, and we saw that on many other college campuses. So we made a decision It would have been in late March or early April. I don't know the precise date, but the subset of the leadership team has said, yeah, this is how we're going to handle this. And I do remember on the 27th, Rebecca was in the room managing everything. I'd been moved out of the chancellor's residence. I was off site, and it's like, all right, you ready? And I'm like, this decision's made. We need to get these individuals off of our campus such that our students who were studying for final examinations could continue their work, and so we could ultimately celebrate commencement a few weeks later.
Thank you for giving us that very kind of thorough run through. And I want to try and turn actually to a lot of the vibrancy that's happening on campus, actually. So for those who may not know, and this continues to blow me away, that according to Hillel, 23% of WashU's undergraduate student body is Jewish. That actually makes WashU the 9th most Jewish undergraduate student body in the nation, which I think is a quite exciting thing. Both Dr. G and Jackie, who really are spending time with students day in and day out, of course, paint a picture for us of what Jewish life looks like at WashU right now, and what student-facing administrators and professionals like yourself can do both to support and really yourselves go through the experience of understanding Jewish student life. You guys can fight for it.
Thank you. We're really proud of that statistic, and I would say that we went into this work not to, as a Hillel professional, and I'm looking also at my assistant director, Hannah, to inspire Jewish joy and to help our students make an enduring commitment to Jewish life. We didn't go into this work to combat antisemitism and to be the spokespeople for defending Israel on campus day in and day out. And if we had wanted to do that, we would have gone into very different Jewish professional jobs. And so I'm really pleased that our campus is so robust and that Jewish life is so vibrant and we are able to cultivate that Jewish joy. And that's really, that's where our passion is and that's where our commitment is. And so I would say now, in addition to the statistic that Maggie just shared, we've become the second or third top choice for Jewish day school alumni in the United States, and that population is continuing to grow. And so on any given weekend, if Hillel is just one example of the vibrancy of Jewish campus life, we're serving 350 meals from a Friday night through Sunday afternoon at Hillel. If that's just one indicator of our success, is just the pure community that we're able to foster for our students from Shabbat evening throughout the day and our popular Sunday bagel brunches. And it just continues through our wonderful speakers and our social justice and service opportunities, Israel engagement, learning, leadership, etc. I'd say the most important thing that Hillel professionals can do to support the Jewish student body and to work with our campus partners, it's really threefold. And the first is to support our students. Support. And that analogy of Dr. G and bringing, embracing our students. We really see Hillel as a second home for our students. It's a Jewish home away from home. And so to create that community for our students where they feel valued, where they feel that sense of belonging day in and day out is really the most important part of the work that we do, and that it's in a pluralistic environment and atmosphere. The second thing is to be an advocate for our students. And so whether that is helping them on an individual basis navigate filing a bias response claim if there's an incident in their classroom or on their first year floor or among a friend group or student organization, that we can be there to support them and counsel them through that we can advocate for them with student affairs and working together with our partners in the chancellor's office to ensure that the policies that the university has in place are being followed. And really the university's done such a phenomenal job, and they've been wonderful partners, but just to continue continue that advocacy. For a number of my peers, that isn't as easy. And the other piece is education. It's education of the student body, it's education of our faculty, and it's education of our administration in terms of what constitutes anti-Semitism, when does that line of anti-Zionism cross into anti-Semitism, and how they can support their Jewish students and really all students, both inside and outside of the classroom, so that they can be at the university to learn and to develop meaningful connections and memorable experiences, which is why they went to WashU in the first place.
So I want to add, and I always like to do things in threes to that. It's so vibrant. I don't know if you all even know the activities that our Jewish students have, including even an a cappella group. And they are everywhere on campus, active in the res halls and student government and clubs and organizations, leading the way for them and their peers, which is fantastic. And in all strands of their life at WashU. I think what I love about this Jewish student experience that I'm seeing and experiencing is we double down on inclusion at WashU in the sense that at Hillel, and maybe this exists in other programs, when I first came, I found out that they actually take both Jewish and non-Jewish students to Israel to understand and have a cross-cultural experience and community. That I think heightens the experiences of all students to gain that experience, that experiential learning that they gain. And I met and I got to know those students who did that, and they love it. They found Hillel as their second home, and many were not Jewish. I mean, they're like, it's fantastic. And that was the openness of our Jewish students and Hillel and partners to say, this is also for you, which I think has allowed actually many of our students to embrace their Jewish communities, whether it's their staff, faculty, or peers, since October 7th. I have to see, I credit that effort. The other thing that I see us doing and our students experiencing is that the proactiveness of WashU, even before October 7th, we partnered together to really think about doing interfaith dialogue and cross-cultural dialogue that has now become dialogue across difference. And that started before then. So I think the education, the anti-Semitism training that we wanted to do will contribute to that joy, right? Because it's happening, anti-Semitism sadly exists. And how do we continue to inform people what it is and how to stop it and how to prevent it? And not just for Jewish community members to do that, but allies to do that. And I think that is such a unique and special place that we can do at WashU that I haven't seen, at least in 5 institutions that I've worked at, really do. And I think the third piece is the resilience of our Jewish students that I see. And it's not just because there's 23%, although that helps, but I think they bring themselves a kind of joy. They are just so active and are in community with one another that even after October 7th, and then the year later when we had the celebration, there was a joy that they had with each other and their willingness to share that joy with us, despite the trauma that had happened, I think, so.
Well, just that student encouragement to engage across difference is so important, and really that work you're doing at WashU is critical. Chancellor Martin, I want to turn to you. So earlier this semester, you wrote a very powerful piece in The Hill. I would just say to our audience and those watching, if you've not read it, please do. And in it, you outline a path forward for higher education, and you address really in a head-on way the parameters around free speech. And for our audience, I want to quote one particular part of your opinion piece. You saying, quote, "Free speech and healthy debate are cornerstones in the search for truth. Peaceful protest can be a powerful means of expressing a point of view, but behavior or speech that threatens, intimidates, harasses, discriminates, or unreasonably disrupts teaching and learning cannot be tolerated," end quote. So my question is, first, what led you to write that piece? And second, and I'm particularly curious about this, is what has the reaction been from your fellow university administrators to that piece?
Well, I wanted to write that piece because I thought it was something that needed to be said. I mean, there are lots of loud voices in the public square around these issues over over the last year. And the most provocative voices are the ones who get the most attention. And I thought it was important to stand up and say a couple of things. One, free speech is fundamental, right? And it's more fundamental on a university campus than it is anywhere else, because we're in the idea business, right? And so it's important for us as we look at every policy, every decision that we make, that's the first thing that we look at. But there's also lines that we need to, as clearly as possible, define, and then we have to act according to that. And so I thought it was important for someone to stand up and say that, because I hadn't been hearing that in a lot of what was being said around the country. What has been the reaction? I think for the most part, when I talk to my peers at other universities, when I talk to our parents and friends of this university, they're like, yeah, that makes sense. And I'm like, okay, good. I think that there have been some of the critical published responses have been a little bit, I'll put it this way. Some of the published responses that are out there, I'd be happy to engage in a debate about some of the arguments. But I mean, look, what's there to argue about, right? Free speech is fundamental. There are limits. Now, we can have debates about where exactly those limits are and everything else, but nothing that happened on our campus last year had anything to do with the content of the speech that was happening on our campus. It had everything to do with the conduct of individuals who were on our campus and that were getting in the way of our students in particular preparing for their academic work. And I think it's also hard to make an argument that you should have rules but only apply them selectively, right? What I'm staking out here is we need to have rules, we need to enforce those rules, and we need to do so in a neutral and fair manner.
Well, I want to thank you, and I think I'm speaking for many here, for your moral clarity and for really laying out a roadmap. I want to turn actually to something that is deeply connected to that and affects all of us here on the stage. So this September, the four of us took part in the University President's Summit on Campus Antisemitism, which Bob referenced. It was the largest ever gathering for administrators to discuss confronting campus antisemitism. It was convened by us at AJC, Hillel International, and our partners at the American Council on Education. We were joined by 75 other university presidents, and of note, and I think, again, we should all be quite proud of this, Chancellor Martin, you were on the host committee for the gathering. Could each of you actually share, again, from your different lenses, something that you took from the summit that you were able to actualize on campus and help inform your approach? And I'll let anyone jump in.
I've got the mic, so maybe I'll start.
Great.
And I know, and I'm not sure, Maggie, if you were there, the three of us were at the first Campus Antisemitism Summit that happened maybe 3 years ago, right? Coming out of the pandemic that we participated in. Attendance at that one wasn't quite as robust as the one this September. There are two things for me that stood out coming away from that summit. First, we had some extraordinary historians come and speak to us. About the long, deep history of anti-Semitism, much of which that I've known and read about in other contexts. But the clarity with which they were able to synthesize that work and sort of trace some of the things that were happening today over many centuries of Jewish history, I found to be quite provocative and very troubling. On the more positive note, talking to my peers, seeing what's happening on other campuses, I walked away with such pride of the rich collaboration that we have at Washington University with our partners, right? And that's true with our immediate campus partners, Hillel and Chabad, who serve our students so well in so many different ways. But it's also because of the St. Louis Jewish community. Why is it that this university has this robust Jewish life? It's because our students want to come here, and one of the reasons they want to come here is this very rich Jewish community in St. Louis that goes back generation after generation, right? And the relationship that I have, the personal relationship that I have with our campus partners, the relationships that touch so many of our professional staff and faculty members. It's like, boy, we are a really fortunate place. Now, it's true with many of our other religious communities as well. I mean, it's something that we take religious pluralism very seriously. I can't imagine having to think about navigating through these last 13 months without those partnerships. And so I walked away thinking, boy, we've really got something good cooking at Washington University.
It was an amazing session. I actually tell friends, oh my gosh, you all should have gone. I mean, we should have all gone.
Don't worry, we'll have another one.
Oh, no, we'll all go. I learned so much. And echoing one of the things that I just clearly, and it stuck to me, and now when I see something, I can speak to that is an anti-Semitic trope. And I know that seems so simplistic, but this isn't something that's taught still today in K through 12 and in college, right? I mean, you're nodding your heads. This isn't like this is what it is. And in the day and a half that we had, just a brief history was so powerful. You know it, but you don't know it, and then you hear it. And I remember writing down, and I'm looking up what happened in New Amsterdam now and getting more books and wishing we need to have every student read and understand this, because it was profound for me as someone who cares about justice and equity and inclusion, and to still be in the infancy stage of it. So it was humbling, and it's so important. And then the next piece is that I took away is how do we bring that to WashU? My locus of control. How do we begin working with our wonderful partners and my other colleagues and others to invite them in, because we need to do more, because we're an educational institution, and we can't give up. We can't just accept it, that this is just what happens and people just say things, or they don't know what they're saying. But how do we challenge, how do we support, and how do we use our educational responsibility? So those are the two things.
You can see why I'm so fortunate as a Hillel director to have these amazing colleagues and leaders at our university. And I would just add that, having 75 university presidents and chancellors at that program in September was unbelievable. It just shows how much the amount of work that you all have on your plates, and that you took time recognizing how critical this issue is in this moment to be there. And we still have so much more work to do to get more university presidents there. But I will say that one piece that you just said, Dr. G, and bringing that back to WashU. So in response to our first University Presidents Summit, we actually worked together this past July, where our Student Affairs and WashU Hillel hosted Hillel International to come in for a full day anti-Semitism training for 70 colleagues from the administration, the various schools, Student Affairs, Res Life, et cetera, on the anti-Semitic tropes and the history of anti-Semitism. And that really came about because you were at the first conference and said, Jackie, I want to bring these case studies back to my peers. I want to be having this conversation. And we were able to really leverage the moment where we were, unfortunately, this past July, but to really have 70 colleagues come together. And I'll tell you that the presenters shared with us that the entire University of California system, when they had a similar training, could not even get 70 people in the room for that training. And at WashU, we did that in one day in July. And so it's really, it's a testament to, they're not just saying these things, they're living them, and they're conveying them to their colleagues, and that message is trickling down, through the schools and through the various departments.
So I want to hit on one other point, I would say, before we turn to questions, so everyone start thinking. And I believe we're going to be passing out, I think, sheets for questions. But I want to talk about one, I think, kind of fundamental challenge that, at least certainly for the Jewish community, we're experiencing within higher education. So something that has really come to light, or at least come more to the surface, let's say, over the last year, is a lack of intellectual pluralism in certain areas of higher education. And too often we have professors or fellow students who it feels like are creating learning environments where only certain perspectives or identities are welcome. And I would say for Jewish and in students who have a connection to Israel, that tends to pose a challenge where it often feels like expressing their connection to Israel, their full Jewish identity, is something that can feel unwelcome in the classroom. And I'm curious, especially Chancellor Martin and Dr. G, what WashU is doing to help try and encourage that kind of open expanse of ideas and really encouraging a diversity of opinion that allows students to be their full selves.
So we're doing a lot of things. I mean, I think first and foremost, we're constantly beating the drum about the importance of pluralism. The diversity of perspectives on important issues of the day is so important. And, there's only so much I can do in the Chancellor's office to sort of make that happen. And of course, Dr. G has no domain over the faculty, although there's a lot that she's doing in terms of our student affairs to make sure that our students are getting a diversity of perspective. But I think it's something that we need to talk about, that we need to be explicit about. And I think one of the things that I've been really grateful for some time is that our faculty leaders are stepping up and they're bringing different voices to the campus, even sometimes if those voices are voices that some members of the campus don't want to hear. That's okay. That's exactly what it means to be part of an academic institution. I think things get more complicated when these things play out in the classroom. And our faculty have a responsibility. Right? They have a responsibility to teach the truth as they understand it, consistent with their disciplinary norms. Right? That comes straight from our academic freedom document. And if we have faculty members who aren't living up to that ideal, that's something that the faculty are ultimately going to need to step up and take on. You want to talk a little bit about what's happening in the student space?
Yeah, I do. So a couple of things. One is our students are amazing and they're bright and they are extraordinary. I mean, I actually just had dinner with about 14 students before I came here, and I always say that to them, and I mean it. A couple of them are here right now, so I don't want to embarrass them. But I do want to say that one of the things we do in the student space is we support them. And so we encourage them to come to us. And sometimes they come to us, they come to our partners when they hear things that lean in a way that is unfair, seems unjust, or maybe in their mind, maybe they're like, it's not quite true, or it seems to not necessarily have a place in the classroom. So we support them in that. We have structures that are in place so we can engage with the faculty in a way that the students are safe from doing so, right? Whether it's through our bias incident reporting, but also just conversations. And also hoping to get them to have that resilience to eventually be able to feel safe enough to actually engage with the faculty. So that's some of the things we do. The one thing that we've seen grow, and this coming semester apparently is going to be, there was a huge number of students that wanted to actually sign up for it, is we set up different programs, but one is called Dialogue Across Difference. There's two ways to do it. One is through a class in which they engage for 8 weeks. RJ, Rabbi Jordan is one of our instructors, actually engaged with it. And it's different topics such as religion or politics or race. And you have to come in and you are actually engaging with different ideas. And you're understanding, you're learning about empathy and listening. You don't have to agree, but they're actually having dialogue. And that's what we want. And the instructors themselves are being forced to actually understand different ideas that the students bring in. And they're reading different materials, doing pluralism in a way that as teachers, as faculty, they said that they're also being challenged in a positive way. And how does that affect how they then teach their other courses? To think of things differently. And so those are just some of the things that we're doing. And finally, for the student pieces, at least for the areas that we can control, like our RAs, our WUSAs, our student employees, we're actually doing training on having them understand difference and appreciate it and having dialogue rather than just condoning yelling at one another, canceling each other out, or shutting each other out. So.
Thank you. And I want to give a lot of opportunity for question here. So we have a number coming in. Let's go with the first. Is there is there opportunity to help students understand what Zionism is as a way to potentially address bigotry that students are feeling when they self-identify that way? Or I guess maybe let me rephrase the question, this person's question. Is there programming that exists around helping students understand what Jewish students or non-Jewish students' connection to Israel could look like?
Well, I can start a little bit. Yeah, one of it actually, and I said it earlier, is even these trips that I know Hillel, I think, sponsors some for Jewish and non-Jewish students, for them to understand, to go there, to engage with one another, to understand their peers' relationship with Israel and what Israel means, and then they come back and they bring that message back to others. Is our students can be the best ambassadors for that, at least in my world, right? So having many of those kinds of programs, having different educational opportunities that we have, certainly that can go a long way in understanding it. And partnering with our faculty and staff who have that knowledge and relationship about Israel, about Zionism, and having them help us develop understanding for our entire community is also great.
Yeah, thank you for the shout out. The Campus Leaders Israel Experience is a trip that we've been doing for a number of years through Hillel, where we take up to 20 non-Jewish student leaders and 5 Israel activists. And prior to October 7th, we'd spend 2 days in the West Bank, and then the rest of our trip in Israel, and students would meet with thinkers and journalists and members of the Palestinian Authority, members of the Knesset, to really gain a better understanding of the geopolitical issues on the ground, so that those students could go back to their groups, the Association of Black Students, the LAS, the Association of Latin American Students, et cetera, and share with their peers that what they're seeing on social media, what they might be hearing in the news, isn't as black and white as they're experiencing, and that there is more nuance and complexity involved, as we've definitely seen over the past year. We're currently testing the return on investment in that on that trip, and we are planning to go again this summer. We're not obviously going to be able to go to the West Bank. We're trying to pivot a bit, but that is one way. Hillel has a number of opportunities for Jewish students to delve into what Zionism means to them, how they define it for themselves, the different definitions, and just what Zionism means in terms of their own Jewish identities. I think there is a lot of work that still can be done on our campus. I think the university is really a microcosm for our broader community, right? And so we're still healing. We're still grieving as a Jewish community. And I think so many of the relationships that we had through the Jewish Community Relations Council, through Hillel, et cetera, with partners from different religious identities, et cetera, we're still needing to repair a lot of those relationships. And so Dialogue Across Difference, I'm so grateful that we have that platform at WashU, that it existed prior to October 7th and was in the works, that we could really ramp it up. But our Jewish students still just needed to be in conversation with one another to process and to grieve. And we're just now, I think, at the place where students might be willing to come to the table with others, with viewpoints of others, to be in conversation. It's taken a long time. I don't know if we're quite there yet. But as Dialogue Across Difference continues to gain traction on our campus, as the intercultural, cross-cultural dialogues within our own broader community continue to delve into these issues, I'm really grateful that we have that infrastructure in place at WashU.
Okay, a lot of questions coming in. I'm going to try to get to the kind of heart of some of them. Okay, so I think one theme that I'm seeing a lot here, and I think actually Chancellor Martin, I'm going to surmise a lot of the answers you gave, I think, get to this, but we have seen other, I would say, very elite schools that had sizable both Jewish communities, but also other communities, cultural communities, who have experienced challenge since 10/7, and I think in many people's eyes have not thrived. What do you think have been really the key reasons why WashU has been able, both for the Jewish community, but I would say for other minority communities, been able to hold up so well since 10/7?
I think that I think the thing for us, look, we had a lot of challenges too last year. It was a very, very challenging year for our community, and those challenges continue this academic year. I think the thing that allowed us to navigate these events in the way that we did is that we have deep, meaningful, sustained relationships across the campus, on the campus, and with our community partners. I'll put it this way. If the first time I was talking to the head of Hillel at Washington University was on October 9th or October 10th, that would be a problem. And the fact that we have those relationships with all of our partners, and it's not just chancellor to president, right? I mean, these are also people who are on the front lines in student affairs talking to one another. These are members of our faculty who have relationships. We're in communication with one another in ways that I know isn't happening at some other campuses. I think for us, that's the secret sauce. And maybe our size helps with that. You know, we're a mid-sized university. We don't have 50,000 students, right? But we also don't have 2,000 students. But even with the scale that we have, 15,000 students, half undergraduate, half graduate, I think that we have those relationships. We're in community. We're able to disagree, which we do from time to time, and still have a strong relationship. I think is important. I think the other thing is that, at least for my leadership team, and I think it rolls down from there, the overwhelming thing that we think about is our mission. We're thinking about our educational mission and our students, and we're thinking about the research that our faculty are doing. There's lots of other things that we could be thinking about, right? But at the end of the day, if you focus on the core mission and make decisions around that core mission, that's going to help us get to the right place more often than not. I mean, it's a very different parallel, but the way in which we navigated through COVID was exactly the same thing. You know, we centered what we were, we centered on education, research, and on the other side of Forest Park, patient care, and try to navigate another complicated situation focused on those values.
So, Chancellor Martin, while I have you, I have one more that I think falls in your purview, and then I have a lot of questions about Hillel as well. There seem to be a lot of questions here. I know this is a complex arena around faculty, and the question of students feeling, again, which connects to the pluralism, students feeling like their viewpoints around Israel could be penalized by faculty. Is that something that WashU has experienced? And if so, how is that being navigated with faculty?
So we have certainly experienced students expressing their views that they would be or were being punished in some way for particular viewpoints. I'll be really clear. It is completely unacceptable for a member of our faculty to discriminate on that basis. There's lots of things faculty should discriminate on. Quality of argumentation, whether you wrote the proof correctly, whether you did the laboratory right. Those are the sorts of things that our faculty are supposed to be looking at. And in those situations, our students need to be able to stand up and advocate for themselves. I know that the academic leadership, our chairs and deans, our provost, and on the student affairs side of the house, those grown-ups are there to stand with our students and make sure we handle them in an appropriate fashion. It's complicated, though, because faculty members have a lot of autonomy, appropriately so, right? They have academic freedom. And with that freedom, as I mentioned earlier, comes the responsibility to teach the truth as they understand it, based on the standards of their discipline.
And Jackie, I'm going to turn to you and also try and combine a lot of questions into maybe like 2 themes, just to be mindful of time. So the first seems to be really this topic of how you think Hillel and the experience of Jewish students has changed post 10/7, meaning what do students need today that perhaps they didn't before? And the other, there seems to be a lot of interest around how Jewish students are engaging, particularly with Muslim students, with other students who perhaps had been allies, and if that allyship has held up, or if there is a new chapter there.
Repeat the first one again.
The first one is, I guess, the shift of what students need now post 10/7 that you didn't think Hillel was providing or students were doing before 10/7.
So good questions. I don't think it shifted per se, the mission, but I think the interest of students, Jewish students, just wanting to be together with other Jewish students in Jewish spaces has increased. They want to be their authentic selves. They want a place where they can decompress with other students who get what they're feeling. They might be navigating really challenging interpersonal dynamics, dynamics at home, dynamics with faculty, social media, right? All these things that we didn't have to navigate when we were younger. It's all around them 24/7. And so they're looking for Hillel and for those spaces where they can just take a break and be themselves. And so to give them more of those opportunities to just be in community with one another socially, culturally, et cetera, we're seeing an increase in that. I'll say one example is we have this bagel brunch on Sundays that used to just be 20 students coming together in our coffee lounge, just to have bagels and lox. It's now like 120 students every Sunday. And, it's not a religious event. It's not around Shabbos. It's not around a holiday. It's just Sunday mornings, well, really afternoons when they get up, 12 to 2. Students having bagels and lox, hanging out, studying together. When it's nice, they're out on the hammocks. They're playing board games. They're just being comfortable with themselves in a space where they know they don't have to put up walls. They don't have to defend themselves. They can just be themselves as they are. So I would say that for the first answer. And then on the second piece, I spoke about it a little bit earlier, but our students are, just as we are navigating really trying interpersonal dynamics, our students are too. But for many of our students, it might have been in their suite. It might have been their roommates. It was their suite mates or people on their first year floors. And I'm continuing to hear from a lot of our students, that they're continue to be shunned from people who were their friends on Instagram, or that they just can't deal with the noise that those people are creating in their lives, and so they're turning them off on Instagram. And so how we continue to help our students with their resilience, I mean, they have been doing a tremendous job over this past year, but just to be able to give them the tools to continue to be themselves, to advocate for what they need for their own self-care, and then as we can move forward to continue to encourage them to be in these places that they really aren't going to be able to have after they leave WashU, of being in dialogue with one another, of coming into conversation with people from different backgrounds, different faiths, different identities. And so we're really, as Dr. G mentioned, having our rabbi be one of the dialogue across difference facilitators gives it that additional legitimacy for students to be comfortable and to recognize that as a space where they can come and in a safe, supportive, encouraging environment, not worried about being judged for what they believe in, not worried about cancel culture, and just be able to engage in conversation for the sake of conversation and dialogue. And that's really where we as a community and as a Hillel and as a university want to continue to pursue and push forward.
Okay, well, I want us to actually turn, we've talked about a lot of heavy topics, and I don't want us to end the night on that. So I would say we're in a moment, both, first of all, because of many of the topics we talked about, and also I should name We are a few weeks out from the election, which itself adds a level of divisiveness, certainly in our community and certainly within the country. But within all of that, what brings you hope right now, especially connected to WashU and being on campus? And maybe we'll go the other way, Dr. G. We'll start with you to kind of turn this way. But what gives you hope?
You know, student engagement and student resilience. I was sharing with Jackie that last month, I think it was last month, I was down at the DUC, the Danforth University Council, our student center. And I was just walking by, and I always check out what the student booths are. And there was a challah for homeless. And I was like, oh, yeah, I want some. They're, Dr. G, buy some bread. I'm like, I will. And they were just having fun with other groups. I don't even know what the other groups were, sustainability group, whatever, right? They were being a part of the WashU community, engaging in something good for others, continuing to do good work and good things, and also being engaged students. So that gives me hope. Like, with all the noise and all the grief and sadness that comes to us and to them, that they are still able to say, we're gonna do this and raise awareness and help end homelessness and be outside of ourselves, because that is what it means to be a good person. And so when I see that, and that's every day, and I see our students do that, that gives me hope.
So my job has lots of different components, and I don't get to spend as much time with our students as I would like to. But I can tell you, every time I'm able to sit down with a group of students, whether it was lunch with leaders that we had, that Dr. G and I had with a group of about 10 students today, whether it was our time with our women's soccer team yesterday afternoon when they won their match and made it to the Final Four in a couple of weeks. These students and the talent that they bring, the passion that they bring, and the convictions that they bring gives me hope. You know, I think about the world that we are handing the next generation. We have not done a good job. But given the talent of these young people, it does give me hope that we will have a brighter future. And if any of you ever want to get a little bit of pep in your step, just come onto campus. Now, not during winter breaks, there's no students there, and it's a ghost town. But come spend some time on campus in the middle of the day. Interact with our students, see what they're up to. It's something that will certainly give you hope as well.
And so, not to be redundant, but in that same vein, with a Jewish lens, our students are incredible advocates for the Jewish people, and they are incredible leaders. And we are really, we're really fortunate to have this next generation of Jewish leaders coming up. And so just to have faith and confidence and trust, not just in the Hillel and Chabad leadership, but to know that if there is a challenging anti-Israel speaker coming to campus, you don't need to use a spam bot to send 2,500 emails to the university administration. The students in those classes are already advocating for balance and conveying to the faculty why they feel that that was an inappropriate speaker, and can we bring this other speaker to share that balance. They're already writing op-eds about the speaker. They're already very articulate with the members of the administration advocating for the needs of the Jewish community. And I think we should feel very inspired and hopeful for those leaders who are coming up, who are in the trenches right now on campus and will be the future leaders of our Jewish organizations and our federations. And they are a resilient group. They're a bright and talented group, and they make being the job of a Hillel director really incredible and rewarding.
Well, I want to say, I think I speak not just for myself here. I think that this conversation, for many of us who have felt at times let down by higher education in this moment, this conversation gives tremendous hope. And I want to invite everyone here to join me in thanking all of you for making the time to be with us. And thank you for the work you're doing every day. We're deeply appreciative.
Hi, I'm Karen Scher. I'm with the Jewish Federation, and I just want to say on behalf of the Federation and behalf of all of our wonderful partners, I just want to thank you all for being here for this really important conversation. And I hope you'll take this to others, and I know we've recorded it so we can send it to you afterwards to remind us of how incredible our WashU family really is in our Jewish community, and it really is a family, and we feel very connected and very blessed. So thank you, Chancellor Martin, for saying, I really want to do this and speak to the Jewish community, and Dr. G for being with us, and of course to Jackie, who's just been such an amazing partner. For decades, Hillel's been a partner with the Jewish Federation, and your leadership has been just extraordinary. And of course, to Meggie, for just moderating such a phenomenal conversation, very gifted, and I thank you very much. I have one more person who would like to do some things, and I'd like to call up Scott Biondo.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for attending this event this evening. I wanted to do a public thanks to Washington University and its leadership. For most of you in the room know this, but my role is Director of Community Security for the Jewish Federation. And in that role, I have an ultimate responsibility for the entire Jewish population in the St. Louis metropolitan area. And often what happens at a university is then either the catalyst or mirrored outside in the community. And I can say that despite the fact that the chancellor might have made a comment about there's no playbook, unbelievable preparedness was there. Not only preparedness, but decisiveness in the way that situations were managed. I was on your campus many times during the course of this last year, working with WUPD, with Chief Kuntz, who I have to tell you, you made the best possible choice ever for your police chief. She's an incredible individual, and it's been incredible working with her. And also I can tell you that in dealing with counterparts in other communities, what we had here really did make the actions by WashU and their leadership really did make the entire community much safer because, there were challenges, right? So sometimes it seems like when you do a good job, there weren't challenges. There absolutely were. I probably talked to Angela every day for the first 6 months, Jackie and Rabbi Hershey as well. But despite those challenges, you were able to keep an eye on what was going on, determine if there were any nefarious actors that might present problems for the university and our community, and work together in that real collaborative way to ensure safety, both on campus for our Jewish students and faculty, as well as in our community at large. So really, I do applaud you, WashU.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. Please join us in the foyer for dessert. Please take them home with you. And have a wonderful Thanksgiving.